It's Saturday night, and it's October 26th, and I'm not sure how others feel, but for me, with the three senior monks gone, there's a feeling of, and also like just Katina on the horizon, it's sort of feels like a calm before the storm. And although we are busy preparing the monastery for this event, I think we'll have it's over 40 guests, 45 guests staying in total. And then there's the busy day of Katina and actually what we're going to do during that time. And these are many of the things that I'm very thankful that Ajahn Yanako is the abbot, and I can sometimes just hide behind him. And also Lumpur, Ajahn Cunda. So it's a nice feeling sometimes. I'm not sure if it's wholesome, but it's a nice feeling. But there is kind of a really good relationship we can have to how we relate to our perception of the future or perception of plans. Because in the community here, we will read out the calendar and we know, we kind of have a sense of what's coming and what's going to happen. And then there might be feelings around that, or, why do we have to have these kind of busy things going on, or do we have to do all of this? Or I really love it when it's busy, lots of things to do. Whatever it might be, it's our relationship to that. And so I've been just thinking a lot about complication and how we bring in complication to our own minds. And I think this is just one experience of that we can ask ourselves, how do we relate to the future? How do we relate to planning? How is it that we bring that in and we are not so negatively affected by it? We don't take it in as something that is creating fear or anxiety or excitement in a way that we're agitated. So during my 3-week retreat, this is one of the things that I was really working with was a sense of just questioning complication, questioning the sense of what is it that I was continuing to bring into my own mind that was causing me to, in a way, increase the flames, increase the wind of blowing on the embers of the hindrances. This greed and aversion and fear, or just being kind of lazy, tired, wanting to just check out, or kind of restlessness and worry, or just questioning, what should I do? How should I do it? Sort of doubt. And we are, as practitioners, trying to learn not to fan these embers that are increasing the hindrances. Just like we talked about it, or we recited in the sutta, this is really examining, like with the fire element, the Buddha was so beautiful in talking about that, how we're in a sense on fire with these addictions to our own senses. And we move with them. We move with them so easily, with just seeking delight and finding if we can, just increase any of them, increase any kind of visual experience or something that tastes right, whatever it is. And I think that's why our practice is so difficult, why the Buddha talks about his teachings as one of the most difficult things that can be done. Because our tendency, I believe, from when we're born, is just to move towards the unwholesome, and it's a fight. It's a fight. It's something that we need to put effort into to rise up out of that, and to move ourselves into all of the wholesomeness that the Buddha teaches about. And so there's a very incredibly beautiful short sutta that the Buddha gives to Gotami, who is a bhikkhuni, and his mother. And so he says, Gotami, these things of which you might know, these things lead to passion and not to dispassion, to bondage, not to detachment, to building up, not to dismantling, to strong desires, not to fewness of desires, to non-contentment, not to contentment, to company, not to solitude, to laziness, not to the arousing of energy, to being difficult to support, not to being easy to support. And he says, you should definitely recognize this is not the Dhamma, this is not the discipline, this is not the teaching of the teacher. And so this is a very beautiful verse. And so that's how it begins in the negative and the negation. And then he says, but go to me. Those things of which you might know, these things lead to dispassion, not to passion, to detachment, not to bondage, to dismantling, not to building up, to fewness of desires, not to strong desires, to contentment, not to non-contentment, to solitude, not to company, to the arousing of energy, not to laziness, to being easy to support, not to being difficult to support. You should definitely recognize this is the Dhamma, this is the discipline, this is the teaching of the teacher. The amazing thing about this sutta is how much it covers in the Buddha's teachings, how really incredible it is. And if we were to reflect on this, I think just day and night, and bring this into our practice just over and over again, asking these questions, they would lead us to really so much peace and understanding, I think. And just as the Buddha said, we would recognize them as the Dhamma and the discipline and the teaching of the teacher. But they're very easy to forget, and the reason is that these hindrances for us, they're so very powerful. As I said, our addiction to the senses, to appeasing our senses, to feeling passion for them, it's so easy to move in that direction and so much harder to move away from those hindrances and from these passion. And so while this seems incredibly succinct and perfect in its teaching, we can feel very good about it, the actual practicing can sometimes seem insurmountable, very, very difficult. And it's something that we can constantly use in our awareness, just in a sense of everything we're doing. You know, when we go to get food in the monastery, when we receive food and then we take the food that we're offered, we can really try hard to remember these things, but then just all of a sudden, oh, that looks really tasty, I'd like that. Or that looks so healthy, I want to have that healthy thing. We might be even quite deluded about that, thinking that we know what's healthy, we know exactly what we need based on things we've read. And so sometimes that's based on a belief rather than a sense of what's actually right for our bodies. But sometimes we do know, and it just depends on each one of us what we're figuring out for ourselves. But we can delude ourselves very easily. Sometimes we might take something and we think we're engaging in a aesthetic practice with food, but actually we're just doing something out of aversion or anger. And so it's just a consistent attempt to really try to be aware of what it is that we're doing, what it is that we're bringing into our mind, and really how are we complicating things? You know, how are we encouraging ourselves to lead towards more to non-contentment and not to being okay with the way things are. While I was on retreat, there were two sort of large cabinets in my kuti. They'd been there for a while, and this kuti wasn't built by the monastery. It was purchased land across the street, and so I thought it'd be nice, much better to not use these. They're essentially empty, and there's so much other storage, and it would open up a large space. So I asked Ajahn Cunda, can we just move these two large storage units out? He said, sure. I said, oh, great, this is going to simplify so much. So took it out with some help, and it was pretty quick. And of course, what happens next? Space opens up, and the mind believes there's not going to be any complications, just a nice little things. But that's not the case. It's not how it works. Behind the cabinets were unfinished walls, some damage that was sort of covered up, and it was different than the rest of the plywood that was around the kuti. So I looked at that and I thought, oh, what's the right thing to do here? Just let go. Maybe I can just work with this and let it go and not do anything. And I think that's probably the right thing for me to do, knowing my own mind. But immediately it became, okay, so going to get some 1/4-inch plywood. It looks like it's sort of an oak veneer, and put it in. Here's where I think I can find the 2x4s behind the wall, and on and on the mind goes. So whenever we do something, we have to be aware that there's always some sort of unexpected complication that we're likely going to have happen with that. In fact, any kind of thing that I have hopes for planning is alleviating some sort of stress in my own mind, or something that's going to make the external environment better, either through engaging with others or doing something, whatever it is. I would say 100% of the time, there's an unexpected consequence that is somehow not pleasant. It's something that I didn't anticipate. And the amazing aspect is that over and over again, there's this expectation that, no, this is totally convinced, this is going to work, this is going to make things better, this is going to make it easier, more efficient, good for others, and that's just not how it is. And this occurs with even just our practice, just the expectations that I can have with what it is that I'm doing, the project of the spiritual life. It can so easily lead to aggrandizing, to making things, in a way, again, just that complicated experience. And so we have to be very aware of this. I mean, an easy thing that we can see now is just how any of us relate to technology. We get something, and it's to simplify our lives. I just walked outside after the meeting, and one of our neighbors came to me and was here tonight and said, "Oh, it's smoky." And I said, "Oh yeah, it's just there's no fires in the area right now that I've seen. I think it's just controlled burns. Do you have this phone app called Watch Duty? It can just tell you with incredible accuracy whether there's a fire, and you have to worry." Well, that seems very good, something like that, but again, any kind of interaction we have, it has unintended consequences. It's never going to always be positive. So let's say we have access to something like that, and then we start checking our phones more, and then we look at these other apps that we might have not checked if we weren't looking at that app, or whatever it is. The defilements are ready. They're ready to pounce at any time. The hindrances are there. It's almost like being at the edge of a cliff, and you're so close to the edge, and all you need is just a touch of wind, and you fall into those hindrances. And so our path of practice is really to continue to ask ourselves, how can I prevent myself from moving into this potential unwholesome experience in any way, whatever it is? And so as talking about with food, it's really preparing the mind before, during, and after. Before we, for example, in the monastery, before the bell rings, we're prepared. How do I not get excited? How do I not get impassioned? I'm going to eat. I'm hungry. What is it that I can do to honor the gift that I'm being given, to keep my body going? But the gift that I'm being given as a monk is to use this gift so that I can decrease passion rather than increase it, so that I can sustain my health, sustain this body, so that the practice can be useful, so that one day I can be realized. I can realize the Dhamma. So we can really try to encourage ourselves, before we're going to eat, before we're going to even take food, and recite the sutta as we can. We can bring this up so that we get to a place where we're actually there. We're there with a desirable object. So as the Buddha's talking about this, the object of taste, we're no longer on fire with that. We're not seeking that. We're seeking dispassion. And we can motivate ourselves, because when we experience dispassion, we do experience it as something that's very pleasant. And it's very difficult to see that, I think, because the quick hit, the quick enjoyment is just to experience the passion, to experience something that's good, that's enjoyable. But when we have a lot of patience and we work with this for a long time, that eventually we see that the dispassion can be quite pleasant. The calm and peace of our experience when we're following the Buddha's teachings is actually far more enjoyable than these quick hits that we're used to. And again, it seems so simple, but how often, just as a question to myself and a question to all of you, how often do I violate that within myself? Do I kind of move towards, just going to get the quick hit, the enjoyment of this, because it's so much easier. And I know I can fall into that very easily, and yet sit down to meditation or try to quiet the mind even while it's occurring, and it's so very difficult to do that. The difference I've noticed is that when I put a lot of effort into recognizing dispassion, seeing the advantage of it, and doing something as I'm talking about, really talking myself through what my experience is before I'm, for an example that I've been giving, before I'm going to eat, the mind is just so much quieter. I just can see I actually take less food. If I can keep that going, then when I'm eating the food, then it's just not, the passion isn't there, the strong desire for it isn't there. And I can easily say, that's enough, I've had enough, or I don't need any more. But anywhere through that whole process of the mind going through thinking about food, and then it's there, and then taking it or making it or whatever it is, and then the eating of it, it's at any point, it's just like falling off that cliff. The wind is just there behind us, just a slight blow, and for us, we want to create as much stability as possible where we can sustain over 100-mile-an-hour winds. Doesn't push us over. And so with our practice, we're consistently making choices, choices that towards dispassion, we're trying to see that very carefully. We're seeing when we do become very attached to something, whatever it might be, can we see that very clearly? And even if we're going to have that thing, like let's say I'm very attached to the robe I have or something I have, how do I work with that? It's not necessarily just getting rid of the physical object, because an attachment towards some other thing might be there. We're seeing that in our own mind. So it might be seeing the unattractiveness of it, again, creating more dispassion around that thing that we desire or we're attached to. Or it could even be like an attachment towards our position or other people, or how people perceive us. Any of those things we can try to work with, just seeing clearly the disadvantage of that very attachment. I really appreciate the Buddha's teaching to go to me on this building up. How do we do that in so many different ways? Build up our experience, make things more complicated, and move towards the hindrances I've been talking about. And how do we instead dismantle? How do we take apart that which we're constantly building up? I appreciated one monk's reflection on this, where he said that monks are very good, or there was a sense that monks can be very good at building things in a monastery. It's just this sense of build a new hall, build more kutis, and I very much have experienced that myself. But what is it not to do that, to let go of those desires? Because that's what we came here to do, was to dismantle. So this teaching to go to me, there are just so many things one can take from it, in terms of, like Lumpur was talking about solitude the other night. And so we, when we see within ourselves that we're seeking company, in certain ways there can be something good about seeking company. That is when we are seeking a teaching from others. We want to talk about the Dhamma, or reflect on the Dhamma, or we decide we're going to help somebody out. We're working on our own generosity. But often, if it's kind of like to go with our own feelings of kind of being excited to be around others, and we don't want to have to experience a feeling of loneliness, then this is not the greatest way for ourselves as practitioners. And it's so much better for us to actually find enjoyment in solitude, to seek out ways where we can find solitude, reduce our impingement from the excited experience of being around others. But the main quality that I want to bring up with this is just how do we look at complication and how we complicate our lives, how we complicate our experience. And each day there are just so many choices we can make where we reduce that complication We ask ourselves, is this something that needs to be said? When I pay attention to that, I can see that I can eliminate so much of the desirable speech that I want to have. And I often chide myself for, I really should have listened to that voice, that wasn't necessary. Anything that we want to create, this is I enjoy in the Dhammacakka Sutta, where it's the devas delight in creating, and the devas who delight in the creations of others. You can see that perhaps there's from our past lives, this is where these kind of influences we might have, but we can always break that. We can always change that for ourselves. And we do have to be careful with that consistent desire to create. And often a lot of that comes into creating ourselves, creating who and what I am. And we often do that consistently with our thinking process, reinforcing the self over and over again, thinking about what I like, what I don't like, what I think about this, my views and opinions. And again, just coming back to that metaphor of dismantling. So when we are able to reduce our complications, then we do immediately see the results of this. And it might be at first unpleasant, removing our passion for something, our desire for something to be a certain way or to do something how we want it. But then the more we get used to that, the more we see how incredibly beneficial that is. And peace, contentment become a reality. And this can be so strong that we eventually can see complications very easily. We can see our minds moving towards non-contentment, and no, I don't want to go there. And it becomes easier and easier to let go of those unwholesome elements and move towards the wholesome. So as we will have this period of a fair amount of busyness, this is my encouragement to myself and for anyone who finds this useful, just to see how can we engage with what we're experiencing in as uncomplicated way as possible. We might see somebody who needs help and we just simply help them, but we don't have to necessarily create an opinion about what it is they need or should be doing, shouldn't be doing. We might have some views about all kinds of things, and we can see, when we really try to let go of these, and we're allowing so much peace and tranquility and contentment within our own experience. So these are some encouragements. And again, anything that's been useful, please take with you, reflect on it, use within your own practice, and otherwise just feel free to leave the rest behind. Iwang.